Well, I'm delighted to have Amy Sherman here with us here at First Presbyterian. And Amy, thank you for giving us time this weekend in Augusta to help our pastors as well as our church leaders and all our members think through what does it mean to love our neighbor and what does it mean to fulfill God's work in the world. I thought it might be helpful for people to hear a little bit of your story and your background. What brought you to the point of being so passionate about loving your neighbor and serving the poor and urban ministry? Just give us a little background first on God's story in your own life.
Sure. Well, I actually grew up in a pretty liberal congregation and didn't hear much about the gospel, but heard a lot about the social gospel. And as a young person, I had the opportunity to go on a number of short-term mission trips to rural Appalachia. And that was my first experience to significant poverty here in the United States. And even as a young person, 8th grade, I had this sense that the Lord was calling me, that it was saying to me that my life vocationally was somehow going to be about the church and the poor, that God really cares about the poor and the church should be involved in doing something about poverty. And of course, this was all rather vague at that point in my life, but I really had that sense of call ever since being a young person. Ended up coming to Christ just before going away to college through the ministry of some friends, and got to college and began learning about concepts I'd never heard before, like having a biblical world and life view, and this notion that God is sovereign over all areas of our life. And so I was able there to really study and think about, what can we do about poverty, and what can we do in terms of direct action, hands-on stuff, as well as some of the more indirect things about policies and programs that we need to think about, how to change structures to help poor people. And so I've continued on that journey, having had the opportunity vocationally to both be involved in very hands-on, direct kind of service, but also, being a researcher and a policy-oriented person thinking about the public policies, but all from the context rooted in God's deep concern for the poor. The Bible is just saturated with texts about God's heart for the poor. And so it's a real joy in my life to have been called by Him in terms of my full-time vocation, to really be thinking about how to equip others and be involved myself in effective ministries of mercy and justice among the poor.
Well, that's a good segue into your book, Kingdom Calling, which was very helpful to me when I taught a series on calling and vocation for our young adults. Some of our small groups have studied through the book. How have you seen God use this, and really what brought you to the point of saying this could be a resource that could be helpful to other believers scattered in various segments of society as well as various geographies, how they can fulfill Christ's mission? How have you seen this used, and really what brought you to the point of saying this is a resource I'd like to put together?
Yeah. Well, the motivations for the book were several, but one that I'll share with you is coming out of that sense of calling I was talking about. I've always been really interested in community development and how can churches really be engaged in transforming their communities. And I even had the opportunity for several years at my own church to oversee our efforts in urban ministry directed towards one particular community. And through a variety of circumstances I won't go into, I began to realize that one of the mistakes I had made as the director of urban ministry was to stand in front of the congregation and think about all of the sort of slots that needed to be filled in the ministry. We needed a certain number of coaches and a certain number of tutors, a certain number of mentors, and people to come and teach our adult classes and be heading up with our women's prayer circles and stuff like that. And I would look out at the congregation and I would see people just generically. I wouldn't see them in terms of their specific gifts and talents and vocational experiences that they've had. I was just thinking in my mind, I need a number. I need 15 tutors, I need 13 of these people. And really what the book is trying to help us do as church leaders is look out at the congregation and say, wait a minute, these aren't just a bunch of generic individuals. These are people who each have been uniquely gifted by God. This one over here, she's a lawyer. And this one over here, he's an engineer. And this group over here, that's a group of young people, and they are working a variety of jobs, but what their vocational passion is the arts, and they're really thinking about that. And the book really tries to talk about how to create on-ramps so that people can serve the cause of Christ through those different vocational gifts, how they can be used to minister through their daily jobs as well as through the work that the church is doing to deploy those particular vocational gifts. So, for example, I wish now, 20 years later, I wish I would have stood up in front of that congregation and instead of getting the bankers to come and be basketball coaches, I wish I would have said to the bankers, I need you guys to figure out how to, deal with the payday lending crisis that's going on affecting the people living in the targeted community where we're serving. I wish I had stood up and thought more creatively about, well, how can the scientists here and how can the nurses here and how can the architects here be used to bring about real transformation in the city, specifically through their vocational gifts. So the book really talks a great deal about that. And I've just been delighted by the response to the book. It's humbling and it's rewarding when I hear people say, "You've helped me connect the dots. I love the Lord and I love my job, but I didn't always know how did my job how was that an expression of my faith? I was trying to be a good person at my job. I was trying to be kind. I was trying to be a hard worker. But you've helped me understand that the work that I'm actually doing really matters. And that my work as an attorney, my work as a carpenter, my work as an engineer, my work as a teacher, that work matters to God and that I can be used to advance His kingdom in creative ways through that work." So I've seen individual testimonies, and then there have been churches that have used the book to really be part of their adult discipleship, and out of that has come changes in their small group structure. Out of that has come the development of vocationally oriented small groups where all the medical people get together and all the business people get together and all the artists get together and they talk about how to use their particular gifts for the advancement of Christ's kingdom. So I've seen the book have an impact on individual lives, but also on churches as a whole, and all of that has been just hugely rewarding, and I'm so deeply grateful to the Lord for using the book in that way.
You mentioned also, I think it'd be good to state that you have a website for resources. Remind us again how to get
that website is called, it's sort of long, but it's called vocationalstewardship.org. So www.vocationalstewardship.org. And on that website are lots and lots of stories about how people are living out this advancing foretaste of the kingdom through their particular professions. Also on that website are some tools and resources for small groups and discussion questions, to use with one another, whether that's in a regular small group or in one of these vocational affinity groups. Questions that will help us hone one another's thinking and think more creatively about how we can be deploying our vocational talents to advance foretastes of the kingdom of God.
Well, this weekend's been a delight and definitely a blessing, and we look forward to not only being exposed to these resources, but also putting some of these things to work and having you come back and help us more. So
I can't wait.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.